solid and mobile top four on defense. And then they have Ryan Getzlaf that drives the offense, and you have the trigger guy with Raquel. If that Henrique line can start going again, that's where this team really starts to be dangerous, because Getzlaf, Raquel, and Perry, when they're all together, as we've seen these past few games, even if they're not scoring all the goals, they are getting a ton of chances. They just need one of those other lines to click, and I would really feel that that Henrique line is the one to look at, just because of the way Kessler's still recovering and Silverberg and Coghlan are just kind of having down years. I would really hope that that third line, quote unquote, is the one that gets moving here and helps this Ducks team and propels them into this playoffs, because they're going to need it. They need to go on a little bit of a run here. They're running into some trouble with these fast teams, but they've shown they can beat these teams. So I wouldn't count them out. I know that we've been really harsh about this Anaheim team, and I know this is a Ducks podcast, so everyone should know we love them. But we can't just be complete homers and say they played a great game tonight and John Gibson had a great game and what a play by Nick Ricci on that goal. It's like a lot of things had to go right for Anaheim tonight to squeak out with a point. And although we're very appreciative of that, there's some things to work on. How do you feel how they match up right now against Edmonton, just to look ahead?
I think it's a favorable matchup, to be honest. I think it's the question when you always play Edmonton is what kind of Connor McDavid are you going to get on that night? There's times where he's good, but that team is so bad that it doesn't matter. He can't really will them to a win. And then you look at the game they had against Ottawa the other night, where they had a convincing 6-2 win, but a lot of it is on Connor McDavid and his 4 points on that night. So you never know what Oilers team you're going to get, and I think the same extends to goal for them as well in Cam Talbot. I mean, he's obviously struggled this year, but there are times where he can flash back to the success he had last year. So I think they match up well. Getzlaf has to be back in the lineup, or it's going to be very difficult for the Ducks to shut down Connor McDavid and get any offense going back the other way, unless, like you said, the Henry Kasher and Richie line can step up. So I think that's a big thing. You would assume he's back. I mean, it is just the flu that he has, and hopefully it doesn't extend over into this next game, because this isn't as big as a game you would expect at this point. If you'd have looked at the beginning of the season and said, well, the Oilers and the Ducks are playing a late March game, this is probably going to have some meaning to who's going to win the Pacific Division. And it hasn't played out that way, where the Oilers are completely eliminated from a playoff spot and the Ducks are just hanging on. But it's going to be tough, and it's only tough because of Connor McDavid.
He's the guy that everyone's waiting to see what he's going to do night in and night out. He can take over a game. You're right. The Ducks are definitely going to need Ryan Getzlaf back in the lineup. I feel like he'll be back in unless he's got some ridiculous cold or flu that's going around, because he only had symptoms. We don't know if he's really sick. He might just have the sniffles and they're playing it safe, just the way the coaching staff likes to talk about it. I joke. Obviously he's sick. But Edmonton on Sunday. You got Vancouver on Tuesday, LA on Friday. I'm going to go ahead and throw a wrench in what I normally say and what the obvious pick of the game of the week would be, the nasty game. And I'm going to say that nasty game is going to be Tuesday against Vancouver, because I don't want to spoil all the fun that could be had on Friday, like I did last week when I said the Calgary game was going to be the game of the week. And that was a dud. The Ducks somehow won 4-0. So this Vancouver team has already lost to Anaheim, but by the time they play them, almost 2 weeks prior, 3-0 at Honda Center. This should be another game where the Ducks are able to walk in and take 2 points, Eddie. Do you see it any other way?
No, I don't. I hope it's a better game than the last time they played against Vancouver, where they were able to come out with a 3-0 win, but they didn't necessarily play that great, which is weird to say when you come out with a 3-0 win, but I think they need to play better, and Brock Besser's still in the lineup for them, so that's a huge boost for the Ducks. But you can't take them lightly. I mean, we had mentioned this last time the Ducks were going to play Vancouver, that teams like to play spoiler at this point in the season, especially when you're playing in the same division, and the Canucks are no different than any other team. They're going to want to hurt the Ducks and take points away, and you're going into their home barn, so it's going to be difficult. But if you had to pick a game that was going to be the easiest to win, essentially, I would have to say it's against Vancouver. They're probably the best matchup for the Ducks out of the next 3 games coming up against Edmonton and LA. So it's got to be a must-win 2-pointer, and I feel you making that the game that could be the feistiest, just trying to not overhype the game against LA like we did against Calgary, because it turned out to be disappointing. We both thought it was going to be a feisty game against the Flames, and there was nothing going on whatsoever.
Nope, it was a dud, but at least the Ducks got the points there. This game next Friday, this is the one that I've had marked on my calendar for a long time, just because it's been a while since we've seen the Kings. It's at Honda Center. This is a huge game. It's just funny how this always works out at the end of the season. You have teams fighting for a playoff spot. They're playing each other at the end of the year, and this is got all the implication of a playoff game. I feel like this is probably going to go Anaheim's way, just because they've been able to play against LA so well as of late. I would not be surprised at all if we saw fights in this game, just given how the last few have gone. I hope it's a nasty game. I still think Vancouver's going to be obviously the nastiest of all the games this week, and it's going to be a barn burner gong show all in one, because I don't want to ruin it for this LA game. But how do you see it going, Eddie?
I think the Ducks get a little bit of a benefit that they'll be playing the Kings on the second of a back-to-back. The Kings play the Coyotes on Thursday, and then they go in and face Anaheim on Friday. So I think that's obviously a huge boost, especially when it's such an important game to face the Kings at this point of the season. Both teams sitting on 89 points with 75 games played. The Kings, when they come into Anaheim, will actually have the extra game played, so the Ducks will have a game in hand. So it'll be even that more important. Because if the Ducks pick up points in the Edmonton and Vancouver game, and you look at Vancouver's next 3 games leading up, they play Edmonton, Calgary, and Arizona. So there's a lot of chance for both teams to pick up some points. It's going to be an even bigger win, because you'll be having that game in hand, grabbing points, and then if you come out of it with a win, you still have that game in hand heading into the next game after that. It's the most pivotal game against of the season. I think the winner of that game probably ends up locking up that third spot in the Pacific, obviously depending on how these next few games go, but it's such a big 4-point game, probably the biggest the Ducks have had in a long time.
Absolutely, and you can't look past the game on Sunday with Edmonton. They play a really weird back-to-back home and home.
Yeah,
LA is in Edmonton on Saturday, so hopefully they beat up the Oilers, but the Oilers still win, and then the Oilers are too beat up to play well against the Ducks, and the Ducks beat them. So that's the hopeful outcome at that point. But then when the Ducks and Kings play on Friday, you're right. That's got to be a must-win. This whole week, really. Let's just say it. They got to win now.
The rest of the games, the last 7 games are must-win games. So I'm not getting none of them
are. Look at it.
Unless you get to the final game of the season and you're already locked up a playoff spot, then fine. But really, I don't see that happening. This is going to go down right to the wire, and the Ducks are going to be fighting for a playoff spot probably until the last game of the season.
So just to put a cap on this, we reviewed the week coming up. We've got an update on Manson. The Ducks come away here with 1 point out of what should have been a full loss in regulation. Sneak a point out of Winnipeg. Eddie, do we have any more questions in our chat or in our Twitter or anything you want to bring up tonight before we call it a night?
Yeah, we got 2 things. So we got a question on Reddit, and I'm going to ask that first. And then I did some research during our last discussion on the Josh Manson thing, and I brought up some guys who could also be considered underrated. So I wanted to kind of get that out of the way now so we don't have to continue it into the next show. So the first question we had on Reddit was from Halo. Going back to the game, he said, did we overextend ourselves in OT? Are we just still not ready for OT? Are we just still not that good in overtime?
I wouldn't go that far. I would just say you're playing a team that's got much faster players.
Yeah.
And Fowler took a chance and got burned. And that happens. It happens to the best players in the world all the time. Everyone bashes Erik Karlsson. Erik Karlsson, I'm not saying Cam Fowler's Erik Karlsson. I'm just saying the best guys on every team make mistakes, get caught in position here trying to create, and that's what happened there. I wouldn't fault the entire game on Cam Fowler, as the whole team didn't play well tonight. But I don't think there was an overextension there. I just think a better team won.
Yeah, and in overtime, you're always going to get that one play that usually leads to a goal anyway. Somebody makes a mistake, you get an odd man rush the other way, and it leads to a goal. I mean, that happens 90% of the time in overtime games. That's just the realistics of 3-on-3 overtime. So I don't think so. I think they've played better as of late in overtime. I really don't think they were victims of still being crappy in overtime like they were up until about the halfway point season, where they had that revelation that you could take the puck out of the zone and regroup. They've actually looked like a better team in overtime. So I'm not gonna go as far yet to say that they're still not that great in overtime. And of course, when they get in the playoffs, it doesn't even matter how they do in 3-on-3 overtime, because we're not going to see it.
Right.
Last point here, I wanted to bring up a couple names. I felt like guys that were underrated to really throw it into the Josh Manson most underrated discussion. 4 guys I brought up.
Kevin Bieksa?
No. I think he's probably most overrated. I'm not. Well, okay, he has to be closer to that end than most underrated. There's no way he's closer to the other side. But some guys I brought up, I'll get your take on them after. But I feel like they're probably in that discussion as well. I'll leave the best one for last. So first one I had was Nick Leddy out of the Islanders. I feel like ever since he's come over from Chicago, he hasn't got as much of the spotlight as he did when he was playing in United Center. So I feel like he's been a reliable guy consistently for the Islanders since he headed over there. So he's my first guy. Second guy, Colton Parayko out of the St. Louis Blues. I feel like he kind of hides under the shadow of Alex Pietrangelo a little bit and doesn't get enough credit for what he does. But again, I still think Josh Manson gets a little bit of a boost over him. Third one was Torrey Krug in Boston, because that's just like a recency bias for me, because he's just been unbelievable for that team as of late, and really that team has just been excellent as a whole, and I feel like he doesn't get enough credit for what he's doing. I think he's getting closer, if not has already passed 50 points on the season, which is just insane. A guy that I don't think you'll be surprised with that comes up next is Matthias Ekholm out of Nashville. I feel like a lot of people agree this guy's pretty underrated. He's sitting behind Yossi and Subban, and has really been a staple of this blue line for a long time. So I feel like he's probably in that discussion. And then the last one, in my most favorite, and the guy I feel like probably takes the the title of most underrated defenseman, is Jacob Slavin out of Carolina. This guy's just a beast, and he's just an unbelievable defenseman. Doesn't get enough credit, and I think a lot of that is because he plays in Carolina, and you don't hear a lot about the guys over there. So he takes the cake for me. I think Josh Manson's not too far behind, though.
What about Dougie Hamilton?
I feel like he's underrated in I think he's a better defenseman than he gets credit for, but I don't think he's still a guy that gets talked about. He's still a guy that gets talked about as being a top defenseman. He's second, I think, in goal scoring in the National Hockey League for defensemen right now. So I still think he gets enough talk, especially being a high draft pick, getting traded from Boston, that it kind of takes him out of that discussion. But there's an argument there. There's an argument that you could put him in that discussion, but I feel like just Josh Manson and Jacob Slavin are just kind of that next level of underrated guy.
I'd put Hampus Lindholm in there too. He's my boy.
I thought about
can't talk about defensemen and underrated without mentioning him. I know you wanted to disappoint me. That's why you left him off. I understand.
I live to disappoint.
We have a statement, not a question, in the chat I wanted to bring up. Chase Perez shouts out to us, "You all should do a 2018 draft live show like you do with the deadline." Ooh. You are our prospect guy. Do you think that we have enough in us to do that? Or is this something we need to offline and chat about?
Don't bring up the trade deadline show. That was a nightmare. That was a 4 to 5 hour show of just utter disappointment. So
I didn't do that one. Obviously, I'm not on Ducks and Pucks. But
we sat there all day and talked about how the Ducks were going to be in for some guys. Hopefully, they're going to sign somebody. And then we got that like hype section / panic during the middle of the trade deadline, where I think it was Frank Cervelli had tweeted out that the Ducks were in on Pacioretty. And then everybody just started panicking for like the last hour and a half, and we were all getting excited, and then nothing happened. We got Chris Kelly and Jason Chimera, and that was that. Yeah, and so I think the draft would be a bit better, because I don't think there's any way you're going to get disappointed. There's always a chance that you're going to see some trades, and at least if there's not trades, something happen. I mean, the Ducks are going to do something at the draft because they have draft picks. So I think it's something we could do. I would love to do it, because I watch the draft no matter what. It's at a time in the summer where I don't have school, so I can just get going and sit down and watch the entire thing. I think it'd be more exciting. Obviously I don't want the Ducks to miss the playoffs, but I think it'd be more exciting if they somehow had a lottery draft pick after winning the draft lottery. That would be insane. Don't think we're going to see that, but it's something we can consider. I think it's a thing we have to sit down and talk about, but I don't know. Does anybody really want to watch us sit there and talk about the draft the entire time? I mean, Gordon Brown Bay says in the chat, more like a Dudline show. So yeah, that was the deadline show. It was a dud. If you want to hear us talk about the draft for 2 hours, I think is how long the first round is, then for sure. I mean, the Ducks have one draft pick in the first round, so it's going to be a lot of talking about other teams. So if you guys want to hear about other teams, then for sure it's something we can consider.
I would have to agree with you there. I think another fun one would be a recap of the free agency, the opening week of free
Yeah.
agency. That'll be fun. A lot of movement always